My name is Amanda Jackson, and today I'll be presenting on the topic of mental health in the juvenile justice system. This issue is one of the most pressing challenges that we face today. Studies show that the majority of youth in the system suffer from at least one mental health condition, yet very few receive proper treatment. These youth are not simply delinquents. They are often traumatized, marginalized, and misunderstood individuals who need help. The goal of this presentation is to explore the causes behind these statistics, the real-life consequences of untreated mental illness in youth, and what steps we can take through policy, programs, and community support to better serve these vulnerable individuals. So over 70% of youth in the juvenile detention have a diagnosable mental health condition. Nearly 30% suffer from severe emotional disorders, such as depression, PTSD, anxiety, and ADHD are the most common signs. Let's start with the numbers. According to the National Juvenile Justice Network, over 70% of detained youth meet the criteria for at least one diagnosable mental health condition. Even more concerning, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention found that 30% of these youth have several emotional disorders. Common diagnoses include depression, PTSD, anxiety, and ADHD. These aren't just numbers, they represent real kids who are struggling in an already challenging system. These mental health issues often go undiagnosed or untreated until a youth is already involved with law enforcement, which unfortunately is far too late. Causes and risk factors. Some causes can be trauma and or abuse, which could be physical, emotional, or sexual, neglect, poverty, unstable home environments, lack of access to any early mental health care, substance abuse, or peer pressure. What leads to these high numbers? Several risk factors contribute to the mental health crisis among juvenile offenders. Many of these youths come from homes plagued by abuse, neglect, or instability. They often live in poverty, and they lack access to quality mental health care. Some turn to drugs and alcohol to cope with their emotional pain, while others are peer pressured and have trauma from their environments that only seem to make things worse. It's not just one factor, it's a web of disadvantages that stack against them. Their communities often lack mental health resources, and schools may fail to identify or even intervene as early as they need to. These unmet needs lead youth into a cycle of behavior that draws them into the juvenile justice system. Consequences of unaddressed mental illness. There are higher recidivism rates, longer stays in detention facilities, risks of suicide or self-harm, difficulty reintegrating into schools and communities. Failing to treat any of these mental illnesses in the juvenile system has serious consequences. Youth with untreated disorders are more likely to reoffend and spend longer times in detention. They're also at a higher risk of suicide or self-harm. In fact, suicide is one of the leading causes of death among incarcerated youth. Once released, many struggle to reintegrate into school or their communities. Without the right support, they end up falling through the cracks. That often ends up in the that often ends up with them going into the adult criminal justice system. And the longer their mental health remains untreated, the more entrenched these problems become for their future. Current challenges in the system. Facilities unequipped to provide adequate mental health are current challenges in the system, along with shortages of trained professionals in the juvenile settings. There's always a stigma around mental health in justice-involved youth. And there's also racial and socioeconomical disparities in care access. So why aren't these kids getting help? For one, many detention facilities are simply not equipped to provide mental health treatment. They are designed to detain, not to heal. There's also a critical shortage of trained mental health professionals, especially those experienced in working with juvenile-involved youth. On top of that, there's a stigma around mental illness, both in society and within the system itself. This stigma silences youth, preventing them from seeking help. Youth from marginalized backgrounds face even more obstacles due to racial and economic disparities in access to care. Black and brown youth are disproportionately incarcerated, yet less likely to receive the appropriate treatment. There are models and programs that work. There's the Juvenile Mental Health Court, the Multi-System Therapy Court, trauma-informed care models, community-based diversion programs. Thankfully, these are the programs that are making a difference. Juvenile mental health courts, or JMHCs, provide an alternative to incarceration by connecting youth to treatment services while also holding them accountable. These courts focus on rehabilitation over punishment. Multi-system therapy is also another effective intervention that involves family, school, and community to address behavioral issues. Trauma-informed care has become more widely adopted, acknowledging that many youth offenders are also trauma survivors. Diversion programs, which redirect youth from incarceration and toward treatment, have shown great promise in reducing recidivism and improving mental health outcomes. There are also legal protections in place. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act ensures that justice-involved youth with mental health needs receive appropriate education and services. It mandates that schools provide special education services even within detention centers. The Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act provides federal guidelines on the treatment of juveniles in custody, promoting prevention and intervention over incarceration. However, funding and enforcement of these laws vary by state, which creates inconsistencies in care. We need more federal and state funding to ensure compliance and consistency in protecting the rights of all youth. The best practices for reform are early screening and assessment tools, expanding access to therapy and medication, family involvement and wraparound services, and culturally responsive mental health care. What can be done? First, the youth should be screened for mental health issues as early as possible, preferably at the point of arrest. Increasing access to therapy, medication, and crisis intervention can stabilize youth before they become further enriched in the system. Family-based interventions and wraparound services are essential for long-term success. Wraparound services integrate care from schools, social workers, and health professionals, all aimed at one child. Lastly, culturally responsible care ensures that all youth receive support that respects their background and identity. One-size-fits-all solutions don't work. We need to tailor our approach to meet all the diverse needs. In conclusion, We cannot talk about juvenile justice without addressing mental health. Treating mental illness not only reduces delinquency, it gives these young people a second chance at life. They are not lost causes. They are kids who need help, guidance, and support. The focus must shift from punishment to rehabilitation, from incarceration to intervention. If we commit to reforming the system, investing in mental health care, and supporting families and communities, we can break the cycle of juvenile justice involvement. The time for action is now. Thank you.